Hi, I'm Kate Kretz. I've never been much of a joiner, but I'm very excited to participate in the Fall of Freedom 2025 weekend. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to see how I have manifested my defiance against the current regime. Under the banner of Fall of Freedom, we artists stand together in creative resistance because when free expression is under threat, art becomes our voice, our shield, and our sanctuary. We live in a time when dissent is punished, truth is twisted, and silence can seem safe. Every person who speaks honestly, creates bravely, or simply refuses to look away is part of this movement. I'm sharing images depicting historical symbols of hate today that may be triggering to some individuals. I've been making anti-fascist art for over a decade now. The work I'm sharing with you is a natural extension of a previous series begun in 2014 that I call #BullyCulture. Several 2018 reviews of the bully culture work categorized it as eerily prescient and clairvoyant, a visual representation of how we got here in a time when everyone was seemingly perplexed by the 2016 election. Other videos on my YouTube channel describe that series in detail. There is a link below. #BullyCulture transitions seamlessly into this MAGA hat work because in 2016, an unthinkable shift in our historical US narrative happened. The bully won. He embodied and further promoted bully culture through normalizing abhorrent behavior and a gaping lack of empathy that bordered on sadism. As any responsible voter should, I did a tremendous amount of research on Donald Trump before that first election. He should have never been accepted by his party as a vetted potential candidate. If more voters had done their homework, they would have known that this is a man devoid of integrity, the opposite of what a president should be. As an autistic person, I'm hardwired to call out lies regardless of consequences. When so many people were trying to give Trump the benefit of the doubt at the beginning of his first term, I was a Cassandra, spouting my gathered information about his lifelong lack of character that no one would listen to. Creating the Lie Hole suite of drawings kept me sane through 2017. I was compelled to capture our new leader's mouth mid-lie, swollen with self-importance and hyper-articulated in 12 different ways. This is how I think about his orifice, disembodied from truth, from decency, and from potential consequences. A perpetually moving mouth spouting. When the cameras left, his declarations burst forth on Twitter. The oral cavity would not be stopped from opining. In late 2018, I ordered my first counterfeit MAGA hats in order to destroy them. Vulnerable US citizens freeze with fear when spotting these iconic red symbols, while wearers love to coyly claim that these caps are innocuous. I cathartically rip apart these hats to reject this claim, then manipulate the pieces into objects that function as corrective physical manifestations of the truth, revealing their essential nature while calling out the wearer's complicity in this administration's atrocities. The first piece was Hate Hat. I realized this object had to exist in the world and figured that I might as well be the one to make it. Although dozens of KKK/MAGA memes now exist, 8 years ago they did not. Several prominent Black leaders spoke out in support of the work, saying that this is exactly what they see when they spot a MAGA hat. Then I made this armband. I was called out, even by some artist friends, for comparing what was happening in our country at that moment to the horror of the Holocaust. They were reading it literally, an affliction of our increasingly left-brained culture. Some called it an exaggeration or claimed it was disrespectful to all the people who died under Nazi reign. My research told me that Hitler's Speeches is the only book we know for certain Trump has read, and he has always been a eugenics guy. So I saw what was coming down the pipe years ago, and I knew where we were headed. What I made was not simply a flippant, provocative gesture, but the firing of a warning flare. I replied to my critics, do you think the rise of fascism began with concentration camps? No, it began with the progressive insistence over the course of years that one group of human beings was superior to another. And I believe that if all those survivors and victims of the Holocaust were alive today, they'd recognize what's happening here, and they'd want us to do everything we possibly could to stop it. When many Trump supporters subsequently embraced this symbol, no one told me I was exaggerating anymore. The reality of this moment has made me impatient with subtle art that merely grazes these issues. It's time for art to detonate, loud enough to break through the mind-numbing, perpetual complacency of our culture. Becoming a mother and thinking about the world my especially vulnerable daughter will have to navigate has turned up the volume on my work. I'm waving my arms and screaming at the top of my lungs in the only way I know how. This is one of two pieces that uses an authentic MAGA hat. While destroying MAGA hats is cathartic in general, completely obliterating this one was distinctly satisfying. This handmaid's bonnet addresses the GOP war to control women's bodies and kill their rights to determine the course of their own lives. This calls out the complicity of Fox News. This is one of the cots of the Trump border orphans. My daughter helped me with this piece and this one. At 11 years old, she designed her own Trump t-shirt without prompting after learning of Trump refugee children being separated from their parents. When we went into lockdown in March of 2019, I saw that once again the most vulnerable US citizens were being sacrificed, and I had to embody this injustice, to make it concrete. So I made a COVID mask. Social murder is a term coined by Friedrich Engels in 1845, describing a situation where the class which holds social and political control places citizens in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and an unnatural death. When people you care about are in peril, you impulsively rush to save them without thinking. Although Trump put his hand on the Bible and swore an oath to protect 330 million American citizens, his instinctive response to the COVID pandemic was not one of love for his people, but a move to protect his own power and image. Other countries shut down for the common good to preserve as many lives as possible. Ours prioritized the economy. regarding U.S. citizens as collateral damage. We think of killing as something that requires action, but the 585,000 Americans who died under Trump's incompetence, deliberate denial, blatant lies, and inaction are no less dead than if he lined them all up and shot them in the middle of Fifth Avenue. He, along with any politician or pundit who echoed his falsehoods about the coronavirus, should be considered at the very least accomplices to manslaughter and at most guilty of crimes against humanity and should be tried as such. This is the first piece where I actually started dissecting individual MAGA letters to make new letters. While I was and reconstructing MAGA hats to call out some of the uglier aspects of our history and fellow citizens, I also wanted to create something that approached this US dilemma from a more optimistic angle. So I borrowed a technique I'd used on an earlier work to make Reparation, Where Our Greatness Lies, begun in August of 2019. I ordered a 5 by 9 foot flag and proceeded to rip out all the white double-sided machine embroidered stars to replace them with hand embroidered stars representing the melanin scale skin tones of actual US citizens. I ripped stars through 2 impeachment hearings, as well as sitting outside the White House, separated from Trump by 3 layers of fencing. Machine embroidery is very difficult to remove. I often had to use tweezers to pull out tiny embedded individual threads and could not help but think about how this process mirrored the difficulty of completely eradicating the white supremacy woven into the fabric of the United States. This flag took about 550 hours to make. It was a labor of both love and penance. I saved all the white threads, and I'm currently working on an appropriate work to address and employ the residual shreds of white supremacy. The MAGA work came about because the Trump family took a perverse pleasure in a devious, slippery methodology of trolling with symbols and slogans, employing dog whistles and speaking in code. Like a mob boss who escapes justice by insinuating but never giving direct orders. 45's repeated MO was to push, to see how much he could get away with, sometimes retracting, claiming sarcasm or joking, but never apologizing for his accidental flashes of white supremacism. That's how aggressors work to normalize bad behavior. They punch the wall near your head, tell you it was harmless, and that you're overreacting before they work their way to eventually punch your face. Since 2016, half of America has been watching this horror movie in slack-jawed disbelief, wondering who is going to save us from this obvious sociopath and what he has unleashed. Here, they are holding a rally at the foot of the Lakota's Sacred Mountains, where they use the song Gary Owen, the one that Custer's troops sang while massacring Native Americans, along with Hitler's most beloved song, Ride of the Valkyries. The Nazi set and costume designer for Trump's brand deserves a special shout out when they all land in The Hague for their turn at the International Criminal Court. Trump's minions follow his lead, trolling in their own way, or normalizing the abnormal bit by bit. A Nazi flag here, a KKK hood there. Men wielding people-killing machines do not allow for democratic discourse or debate, and that is the point. Intimidation of your fellow citizens is terrorism. An untrained minor illegally carried a semi-automatic weapon across state lines, killed peaceful protesters, walked away free, and Republicans made him a hero. When he was on trial, his judge told prosecutors that it was sort of forbidden to label his dead victims as, quote, victims. Trump supporters planned the kidnapping, rape, and murder of a female governor who opposed him. And now Trump goons, masked men with guns, no identification, no body cameras, and no accountability, are terrorizing our cities, removing, incarcerating, and torturing legal citizens, chaotically moving them from place to place so their families can't find them. This is Trump's America of unchecked power. This is MAGA, and it has not gone away. I rip up hats because I reject this new normal and all the abusive gaslighting that goes along with it. It's just a hat, they say with a smile. No, I respond. I see what it is, and now everyone else will too. I made this work thinking that it would be my last MAGA piece, but we weren't so lucky. The threat continues, and so does my work. Trump still denies the legitimacy of the 2020 election. He tried to stop the peaceful transition of power to the next duly elected president. He sent his followers to overthrow democracy while watching the death, destruction, and violation of our capital from a safe distance on TV. However, he himself has not been brought to justice. And as many have pointed out, an unpublished coup or an unpunished coup attempt simply becomes a rehearsal. Trump's forte is branding. He's branded buildings, steaks, watches, wine, even a fake university. Now he has branded his own cult, one full of members he would never give the time of day to in real life, but who still seem determined to deliver our country to an authoritarian dictator. This brainwashing, which I believe began with The Apprentice, has ripped millions of families and friends apart like any other cult. Making challenging political work in this moment required learning on the job and making up my own rules as I went along. My ultimate dream for this work would be to procure a high-traffic downtown DC or New York venue to exhibit it in display windows. Since graduate school, I've always made work to show in museums. Circumstances have led me to work primarily outside the commercial gallery system, so I rarely discuss or negotiate the exposure of these images with anyone. Instead, I release my work by sharing it online, simultaneously exposing it to the general public and an art audience that I've built over several decades. In this way, it enters the popular conversation directly. If it strikes a chord, people share it, and then opportunities to exhibit the work or include it in publications often follow. For now, considering recent anti-DEI efforts, I'm arranging to tour Reparation, Where Our Greatness Lies, around the country, beginning with traditionally Black colleges and universities. Creating this work, this whole body of work, has had considerable impact on my career, my family, and my mental health. Hate Hat got me banned from Facebook for 3 weeks. Other works were repeatedly taken down from Instagram. I wrote a piece about this censorship for Medium. Some news venues picked it up, and some kind soul created a petition. As a result, I got my page back and an invitation to show the work in San Francisco. The gallery and I started to get threats against the work and against me. So we made the show a more secure, invitation-only weekend pop-up, ignored requests for follow-ups from all the press we had received when it came to be showtime, and what might have been a career-changing exhibition shrunk to a more modest version for safety reasons. I have a file with the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center. I maintain folders of hate mail, threats, and screen grabs. My research has shown that those who seek to silence political commentary in visual art overwhelmingly target women. I wish that I was wrong about that gut feeling 10 years ago that drove me to make this series. While some are put off by the intensity of my work, my one fear is that my cry is not loud enough, not dire enough. We're living at a pivotal moment in our history. Historians are telling us that the current US environment is one that they've seen before, identical to governments that went on to commit some of humankind's worst atrocities. There are people working behind the scenes at a local and national level to restructure power, reframe the truth, build an army, and disempower the voting citizens of the United States. They embody bully culture, and they push the boundaries a little further every day. Malevolence relies upon our optimism, distractibility, and short attention spans. My work is confrontational because we need anger to fight injustice in a corrupt system. And anger is a natural response to abuse. There are two ways to live your life. One where you understand that we're all interdependent and need each other, and the every man for himself way, which, as an ever-escalating paradigm of consumption and destruction, is not sustainable. The individualist bubble of consciousness, like a toddler, doesn't extend beyond his own immediate desires. Everything is here to be used for his pleasure, with little regard for whether it is built on others' pain. In contrast, when you understand that you're connected to everything and everyone, when a child is ripped from the arms of their parents or shot by a school shooter, that was your child too. You can't stop thinking about how terrified those poor children were, and you are bereft alongside those parents. You feel the horror in your own bones, and you must do everything that you can to stop it from ever happening again. When an innocent father, mother, son, or daughter is senselessly traumatized or murdered, and especially when that perpetrator goes free, and this happens over and over again, we should all feel the rage of that family that was first robbed of a loved one, then robbed of justice. Empathy is innate, but we need to take a hard look at the methods being used to condition it out of half of this country. So many of the world's most ancient religions understood our connections to each other, to the creatures, and to the earth that we were put here to sustain and protect. The golden rule embodied in all major religions is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because in effect, we are the others. As DNA tests become more ubiquitous, it's likely that many people are going to discover that they're related to the people that they hate. We inhale and exhale air that move through the lungs of people and animals and trees on the other side of the world thousands of years ago. We share DNA with animals, trees, soil. They are our biological kin. Bullies need our complacency and distractibility for their empowerment. We need to be allies for each other. The ugly human aberrations who would bully one of us will eventually bully all of us. They are amygdala-driven animals who basically fear and aggress against anyone who is not like them. What a powerful force we would be together against all perpetrators, not just the ones who pick on the group that we belong to. Our ability to recognize any bigotry and intimidation, even in its milder forms, along with our willingness to call it out and act against it, will determine the future course of humankind. In this age of capitalism run amok, many voices are relentlessly trying to convince artists that we are just another type of entrepreneur. But we really need to understand what we lose by rebranding artists in a way that both underestimates and undermines their power. Although it's never a good time to defang creatives, it's a very dangerous moment in human history to be telling our prophets and visionaries that all they need to do is act professionally and grab their piece of the pie. We need them to help shape history. Finally, it's critical to point out how the art world system controls which art is validated and visible to the public. So many spaces claiming to exist for the purpose of discovering, presenting, and supporting artists shy away from promoting challenging political art. It's not only the approval of board members and marketability that limits what is seen, but fear of losing likes and followers in this attention economy. We cannot celebrate the bravery of artists willing to take a stand without acknowledging the scarcity of venues and platforms willing to do the same. The fight against authoritarianism is the responsibility of every citizen, platform, and institution. Getting censored is not always dramatic and active. It can be passive, a sin of omission. Pay attention. How many magazines and online creators never show anything risky? Who is looking the other way and maintaining the status quo as our country spirals into authoritarianism? Don't talk about the power of art and pretend to support artists if you as a person or as an institution are essentially hiding. Writer Kurt Vonnegut famously called artists the canaries in the coal mine. Bertolt Brecht told us that art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. Some of the most powerful businesses and governments in the world fear and silence artists exactly for this reason. But when we stand up to call out the truth, it inevitably inspires others to do the same. Bravery always begets more bravery, even if it causes some discomfort in the process. What we create has its own life in the world. The more people share it, talk about it, but also argue against it, censor it, threaten you, the more power it gains. So please visit falloffreedom.com Whether you are an artist, librarian, technologist, truck driver, a nurse or a banker, a teacher, a student, or a parent, you have a role in this. We must resist. No act of courage is too small. You must ask the questions that fear cannot answer. You must tell the stories that power cannot erase. You must imagine the futures that oppression cannot destroy. Carry that spirit outward. When we act together, our words cannot be silenced. When we stand together, freedom stands taller. Share your experience and help spread the word about Fall of Freedom with your communities. And I thank you.